Welcome to the Rumbizai Show. Thank you for joining us and thank you for tuning in today. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you are on Facebook, please share this video and press like, subscribe to our page and share with your friends. Today, we are so happy to have Coach Dumi with us again. And he's going to be talking about his journey onwards from where we finished off last week and talking about some of the great work that he's doing in the community and in the corporate world. If you missed the first one, please watch out for it on YouTube and on Facebook, and there will be a link in the comments. So thank you very much, Coach Dumi, for talking to me again and continuing this conversation where there's so many key things that we need to just get from you and get it out to people so they can hear the amazing work that you've been doing and just to be encouraged as well. So thank you very much for joining again.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, so last time when we were talking, you talked about how you finished off with this wonderful poem and talked about going to university. So we sped through the last bit, but I want you to perhaps go back to from the day that you recited that poem to yourself and you applied for that UCAS application. Yeah. What happened around getting that place? So
the following day, I pick up, go online, pick up that, download the UCAS application, apply. It was probably the scariest thing I've ever done because, I didn't, like I said, they hadn't gone through the education system in the UK in any meaningful way. When I was doing nursing, I was barely attending lectures. I was not engaged, And so I applied to 3 universities. I think one of them was Kent, then Bradford University. Then I applied to another university called Leeds Beckett University. Not very well known. At the time, it was called Leeds Metropolitan University. Yeah. So it was a college, and it just received its university status, what they call post-92 universities. Yeah. And at the time, I think I had better awareness of actually what I wanted to do. I was interested in global affairs. I was interested in how institutions work. Yeah. I was interested in how communities can be empowered, And so Leeds Beckett University, particularly, they had a degree that combined international relations and peace studies. And Bradford had peace studies. It's one of the most known universities when it comes to peace studies, Bradford University. And then Kent, I think it was global politics or something like that I applied for. Yes. In some sense, they all aligned. So these 2 more established universities, Bradford and Kent, gave me a conditional offer on the condition that I had to explain this 10-year gap, and I just feel like I couldn't explain that because what do I say? I've been stacking factory shelves, and does that demonstrate that I can complete a degree? No. But that was then. But now as a career coach, actually, I now understand that it doesn't matter what experience you're doing. You could actually articulate that in a way, because what people are looking for are competencies, skill sets, your kind of mindset and attitude. That's what they're looking for. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. That in fact, I've supported a student who was working in a corner shop and helped them to apply, to an internship at Goldman Sachs, and they actually, got that internship. Wow. So it's not what you do, it's how you communicate. But I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, long story short, so I took the place with Leeds Beckett University because they would have me, And Leeds Beckett University had a 24-hour library. This library is open whether it's Christmas Day, whether it's a Sunday, and I became furniture in that library. Because I understood that I had a long way to go. For me to be able to do. I was studying with people who were at least 10 years younger than me. And so I understood that I needed to put in the work. In fact, during the time, I actually got diagnosed with an eye condition, which meant, it's the layman term for it is stigmatism. It's called character or something. So it's more complex than that. I'm not really interested in the term, but it meant me reading would take me much longer than it would someone else, Wow. And so I put in a lot of hours. Our library, I joke around this when I go around speaking, that it had these, those censored lights. And because often I was the only one in the library at these odd hours, the lights need movement, and when there's no movement, they dim. And because of my eyesight, it would also be very difficult for me to then read. So I'd literally stand up, walk around running like this,
And you'd be the only one in the library.
Yeah, the only one in the library. Wow. This might be Sunday morning at 3:00 in the morning, right? Waving my arms, and then the lights come on, and then I go and read for 30 minutes. I do that again, the whole thing, right? Wow. And often it wasn't unusual for me to be stumbling out of the library maybe at 3, 4 in the morning to go and get a couple of hours sleep, while maybe some of my colleagues were stumbling out of nightclubs in the town. I'm not judging anyone, but I understood that
What
I
you're
had a long way. Yeah,
to go
So if
for.
you have a goal, you need to be committed to putting in the input that's required,
Yeah.
and you have to understand what that takes. So anyway, despite that background of not having been in the system and being the oldest in the class and didn't have all that confidence that I could actually see a degree through, I graduated as the highest in the entire department.
Wow.
Won a couple of dean's it's called Dean Special Awards. One was Best Independent Research Project for my dissertation, and the other one was Best Applied Global Politics for all the activities that I was doing using my education to be in things like child rights activism and things like that.
And so from that's just phenomenal. And even just your resilience, you had so many things going against you. Yeah. The eye condition, like you said, being the oldest in the class, being out of education. And from that to awards and then getting into Oxford. Yeah. And how did you get into Oxford University?
So I remember, because I think for me, I had this understanding. It's about where you want to go. Mm-hmm. I had this understanding that, in fact, at the time, I actually, looked at potentially doing a PhD, and I was going to do what's called a 3+1, where you actually do a PhD without necessarily going to do a master's. Okay. So I'd actually written a whole proposal while I was writing my dissertation. I remember one of the lecturers saying to me, "Maybe you're taking too much of a risk. You're going to underperform in your dissertation because you're doing your PhD. And you're applying to universities like Oxford, which are difficult. The application process itself is pretty much like a dissertation, in terms of even what's required and how much you have to write and and things like that. So it's a lot. And so so this person, from their perspective, I don't they were right that maybe you're taking a risk, but I was prepared to do what it takes. So I would put in the hours. So and I remember actually at some point when I was asking for references from one lecturer who himself had actually gone to Oxford University, and he said to me, and again, I don't begrudge these people because I understand where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. They're looking at me in my current circumstances, but they're not perhaps aware of my potential and what I'm prepared to do. And so he said to me, you're not likely to get in, which is fair enough. It's difficult to get in, but he also said even if you got in, chances you will not get the funding. In fact, he's right. I didn't get the funding, but I actually did a fundraiser. I did a crowdfunding, went over the summer, and and managed to raise the money. Right. Wow. But in the end, I was committed and I applied. I was prepared to take the risk, and I was prepared to put in the hours. And I remember, and I had a lot of support too. There were a lot of lecturers who were, particularly my supervisor. My supervisor for my dissertation. His name is Robin Redhead. Who has become a friend and is still a very good friend of mine. And she's the first person I called when I saw that letter of acceptance. And I said, "Robin, we got in." And she was screaming on the other end of the phone. I was screaming on this end of the phone. So I think I shared that story to say, look for support where you can get it. Yes. Don't begrudge those who can't quite support you at the time. Yeah. Because understand where they're coming from. Yes, it's not that they're driven by hate or anything like that. It's just maybe they can't see it at the time, and it's okay, But as long as you see it yourself, then look for the right support. So like right now, I spend a lot of time supporting students who, a little I get excited. I heard your daughter just now saying she wants to get into Oxford, right? Yeah. And I'm excited because, we have to play our part in helping others to be able to get into these spaces. Yeah. And hopefully to share our stories to show that a person like me with my skin color and my background can get in. Get in. There are no grounds or places which are for particular groups of people, even though institutions can be quite marginalized against other people. Wow. But you can get in. You have to dream it first and want to do it, and then find the way to do it. So anyway, long story short, then I done a degree in international relations and peace studies at Leeds Beckett, and then I did a master's in African studies. And the reason why I did that is because I felt like, okay, while my degree was amazing, and I enjoyed it, I feel like there was a gap in my knowledge. Africa was kind of viewed from a very subject that people do things for. I didn't see the voice of Africans kind of accentuated and brought out. And I felt, that's problematic. And I wanted to bridge that gap, And so when I go to Oxford and I did African studies, but by the way, even that, when I announced on my Facebook, I remember writing saying, "Hey, I've been accepted at Oxford to do African studies." I was amazed at the backlash. Yeah, there was a lot of excitement as well. People saying, "Oh, well done, Dumi, congratulations." That post, I remember it hit something like probably 30,000 on Facebook, right? And there were also people who were, you're going to be, you may as well go and do nuclear energy, studies at Oxford because you're going to the, the territory of the enemy. How can you study African studies at Oxford University?
Really?
You're going to come and destroy the continent.
So dear, you always have those people, isn't it? You always have them.
Some of them would actually, some of them were so dedicated. They would come on my, fundraiser page, on a daily basis to post something negative.
Wow.
And I would take it down. They'll come back, post it. I'll take it down. But
wow.
Shut out all that noise.
All the noise.
Shut out.
Yeah.
And do not begrudge those people. Do not spend your time on negativity. Focus on what you need to do, as well as a lot of positive support that's around.
Yeah.
But
and
in the end,
managed to get there with
I got there,
crowdfunder, and you said you worked through the summer.
Through the summer, yeah.
And then you were able to graduate.
Absolutely,
wow.
yeah. And and so after that, then started my journey of getting into institutions. Particularly I guess I had an understanding then that given that I'd faced some of these challenges in my journey, it must be quite difficult for people to navigate their space into some of these spaces.
Yeah.
And
so
the corporate world is an obvious one.
So I suppose being at Oxford University then gave you a launch pad into some of the places that you've been able to get into, like running the programs at like Goldman Sachs and some of the other FTSE 100 companies that you work with. Yeah. So that gave you that step up, isn't it?
You'd be amazed. Just because you went to Oxford is not an automatic.
No. Okay.
You'll be amazed the number of emails I receive from people who studied at Oxford and Cambridge, Harvard, saying, "Can you help me? I'm struggling to get into employment." So it's not a ticket and then doors are going to open.
That's wonderful for you to say that, because that's what I thought automatically. I think a lot of people would think that. So that's good.
No, not at all. I know it's really not the case. But even before, and I think this is what students sometimes don't have an awareness of. Yeah. Even while I was doing my master's, I was already, because you have to recognize what you have. Often students come from a perspective of, they look at what they don't have. So you're coming from what I like to call a job-centric mindset, which is, give me, and I don't have. But actually, there's a lot you can contribute already. And so I had the awareness that, I don't have to wait to get that certificate for me to get into the industry that I wanted to go into. Mm-hmm. So while I was at Oxford, I was already going and participating in roundtable discussions, conferences, contributing my expertise. Because I was coming from a very research grounded perspective, which sometimes people who are kind of foregone in the industry don't even have that sometimes, And so I was able to bring something unique into the industry. Now, what that does also, it already, it puts you inside the networks in the industry that you want to be. Yeah. So, I always say to people, a job is not the key that you need to get into industry. You can get into industry, and a job is just a step along the way.
Wow.
So my last for final exam at Oxford, I actually put a post on LinkedIn. And that post is what led me to getting the opportunities. For instance, working with. So I put a post. I said, "This is my journey. Today's my last day of my studies. I'm looking for a great company, a great organization that works in these areas of equality, diversity, inclusion, helping people who are marginalized to get into spaces, particularly in the corporate world." And I got 4 organizations to approach me.
Wow.
So in the end, I didn't apply for a job. I got 4 organizations to approach me. Wow. But one of those organizations called SEO London, which is a charity, which now I'm working with them as a consultant or contractor. So we were in a kind of transition period. So I worked for them, heading their outreach program and and kind of going around the country. I think I went to about 50 universities, giving career talks to students, particularly of Black and so-called ethnic minority. I don't like that term, so I call it ethnic minoritized backgrounds, because I don't know who did the numbers and decided this is the minority group and this is. But anyway, so again, I share that story to say this. Money is important. That paycheck is important. But if you really position yourself in a place where you can have the greatest impact in the shortest period of time, you're going to be visible. And money is never going to be a problem later on.
Yes.
So the reason why I went with SEO London, even though they paid the least out of the 4 organizations that did approach me, was because their mission, they're a very mission-driven organization, and they help thousands of Black, ethnic minority, low socio-economic background students to get into the corporate world. Now, working at the front line with SEO gave me exposure into the industry, because I didn't have that exposure, So I began to understand the language. I began to, every sector has its own kind of, unique subcultures. I began to understand the issues. What are some of the challenges? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? What are people missing? So over the time, I started developing programs. And an awareness that, okay, even though SEO does great work, but there's some people who are falling through the cracks that we're not able to help, particularly those who are outside of the corporate bubble.
Yes.
So this is why I do a lot of work with people like, Rumbi, or your namesake, African
Mkoy.
Youth Arise, Rumbi
Yes.
Mkoy. So I go outside of the corporate bubble, and I've been to churches across the UK. I've been to even South Africa. I was invited to visit university in South Africa to deliver these programs for people who are outside of the corporate bubble and may not even be aware of opportunities even through organizations like SEO London.
Oh, I see.
Because those people sometimes have a long way to go.
Yes.
They need kind of internal awareness for themselves first, even before they begin to unlock some of those skill sets that are required in that organization. So someone may not even know that there's an organization called Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
They've never heard of
They've
that.
never heard
They
of
don't
it,
understand that there's an industry called, what does the finance industry look like and what does that entail?
Wow.
So I started reaching out to those people. And so over the time, I was developing programs. But then I realized that you can support these people, but if you don't also, in a sense, enable the organizations themselves to create the safe space for these people who are just not socialized to be in part of these spaces, that space is going to be awfully intimidating. It's going to, they're going to be chewed up and they just want to get far. So that's why I started training now, leaders, managers, working with organizations on their equality, diversity, and inclusion strategies.
In
the corporate.
That's amazing. That's phenomenal. So much, and so many steps and nuggets that you've shared with us there in terms of when you're at university, you create you what's in you and what you have to offer, and how you got your job through your story on LinkedIn is so powerful.
Thank you.
And then as well, where your rags to impact phrase comes from, in terms of not rags to riches, but rags to impact, and then riches will come. Riches will come, but rags to impact. So that's powerful. And I just want us to, for you to talk about perhaps the pre coaching that you do for the younger people, like what you do with Rumbi Mkoy, the one-to-one coaching and the university coaching, because you did a degree in African studies and peace studies and international relations. And for I want you perhaps just to speak to the parents and to the young people, perhaps just in career choices, as to what your degree choice has to do with where you end up and how you are, because we are used as parents. I'm a typical African mom who would rather go for the safe careers and direct their children to something that I know they'll have a job, because that's how we were raised. That you go to university, you get a job, get a mortgage, you pay it, and then you die. You die. So what advice would you give in terms of your programs that you do?
I think the greatest challenge often is that, people who need the help the most tend to be the least aware that they need that help. It's almost like this double, you don't know that you don't know, right? And that's challenging. Someone who knows that they don't know will start looking for the right help, right?
Yes.
So for parents particularly, this is really crucial. And I understand, I'm a parent too, right? And sometimes when you as a parent don't have also the awareness, and we can't all know it all. I don't know it all, right? When you don't have the awareness of actually how navigating, a career, getting into it and navigating some of these spaces looks like, it might be difficult for you to then guide your child effectively, And so what then tends to happen is you find people who come from homes where, the dinner table conversation involves the kind of thinking about how they could go about getting certain careers. They are able to grab those opportunities and to do well. So for parents, I would say to you, it's really important to be intentional about exposing your child, to this practical help. And I say practical help, it's not just about sitting down and writing a CV and then sending it off. It's about knowing who they are. Right. It's so important. And knowing who they are is part of knowing, what are they gifted at? What are they passionate about? Because often we're kind of pushing people into jobs which don't align with their natural talents. and then therefore they're already shortchanged. If something is a natural gift to you, it's a bit like writing poetry or storytelling. It's a natural gift for me. So for me, someone might say, "Wow, how did you write that?" But literally, it's like I was a passenger. I wasn't thinking about it. It just flowed out of me because it's something that God has put inside of me. So it's important to give our children the confidence and the courage to actually connect with who they truly are. So that's point number one. Point number two, particularly I think for the young people themselves, is understand that the degree that you do. I always use this example that just because you've done a geography degree, it doesn't mean that you wind up, in a job where you hold a map, right? Now, what employers are looking for, they're looking for rounded people, people who, so it's more about your competencies, your skill sets, but actually the character you are. What kind of person are you? Are you a person who can still do well under pressure? Are you a team player? Are you someone, so all those kind of aspects really matter, and so it's not an afterthought. You could do well at university, get a distinction, a first, whatever it is, but even go to a top university. But if you're not rounded, if you don't demonstrate that you are this character that people would want in their kind of corridors, then you're just not going to get those opportunities. In fact, now a lot of corporate organizations and in some sectors too, they're not putting so much value in your degree. They're putting more value now in what kind of person are you. And I would also say, there's this myth that first year doesn't matter. You go to uni, it's all about partying. And by the way, I'm not saying don't party, but understand that right from get go, you need. In fact, first year is it's not too late. It's never too late. But for instance, with SEO, we have a schools program where the students who are from the age, I think 13, 14, they're already getting internships in the corporate sector. So they're getting what we call early industry exposure. So you might if you start thinking about what career you want to do, you want to go into finance, and you're already in your final year, of your degree. It's almost too late, because you've got all these other people
who started at 13,
right? And who are also part of the system, because these firms pay organizations like SEO London, to go and do the legwork out there. So why would they look at your application that has come from the blue when they've got thousands of other applications of people who've been to their headquarters, who've been mentored by people who work for them, who understand the culture well, who've been mentored in the right ways. In some sense, it's not enough anymore to go on a website and look at an organization and say, I know you very well, I love what you do, I want to be part of you. Now you want to be saying, I've been immersed in your processes, I know you well, I'm part of you, and you want the organization to know you as well.
Wow.
So from that perspective, it's a different conversation from someone who's saying, oh, please, can you give me a job? Sure. The job-centric mentality I was speaking about. So
with the parents now, that's key. What you said is, the people who don't, if you don't know that you don't know, then you can't know.
It's difficult.
So it's so important for people who have heard this, because there are many parents who are struggling with their children over career choices, and we're like miles apart. And even what you've said, that we need to start coaching our children, positioning them at age 13 to 14. That's profound for us as parents to know that we've got to have those conversations early. So I know that you run some programs. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the programs and perhaps where people can get you? Because I think you've got so much value and so much to give.
Thank you.
And we need people to know where to get access to information. For me, talking to you, I've just learned so much. I've got two children. One's finished university and there are two other ones. But I need to be now thinking of, as a mom, how can I position them? How can I help and support them so that they have that internal awareness and that they're able to get the best out of themselves? So for other parents, what are you offering at the moment, and where can they get hold of you?
And I love the phrase used, the positioning. It's so key. So my partner Noma, she shared an analogy that was shared by someone called Dr. Cindy Trim, people may know, motivational speaker, and she used the analogy of American football. She said, in American football they don't throw the ball at a person. So what they throw the ball downfield at a position, right? So they target a position, and people who are already, the kind of strikers, people who are supposed to score, whose responsibility is to score, already know that the ball is going to go into that position. So they now jostle and run to get to that position, getting the timing right. So the key is about what you're doing. You're helping your child to have that mindset of what does it look like to navigate
Yeah.
this terrain. Or if someone is going to try to tackle you, someone is going to stop you, but you are going to a position.
Going to that
right?
position.
So what does that look like? But in terms of programs that I run, yeah, I've got one-to-one coaching because I think it's so important. It's so important, particularly for young people. And they're never too young. I've coached children from the age of 7 years old.
Wow.
They're never ever too young. One-to-one coaching, particularly on these aspects of who am I? And and it's really spending time. And what I do I do not like this copy paste or one kind of format fits all. I like to spend time to get to know your story, your child's story. Let's develop a roadmap. That helps them to unlock their full potential.
Wonderful.
That's one. And then I also run, like right now I've got I think 2 master students who I'm actually coaching through their dissertation, right? Yeah. Because sometimes they say to me, "Hey, Dumi, we actually don't know the process of writing a dissertation. What does it look like?" So I go with them through the process, And one of those students went from being very doubtful and frankly not doing very well, to actually getting, for their proposal for their dissertation, getting a first over 70%.
Wow.
So but what I say to them when they send to me, they say, "Oh, Dumi, look at what you've done." I'm like, "No, it's not me.
It's you.
It's you.
Yeah.
You already had this potential inside of you. Yeah. As a coach, I just help you to see. Coaching is like holding a mirror. Mm-hmm. I just hold a mirror up to you so that you can see yourself. Some aspects of you that you don't yet see. And so it's really got nothing to do with me. I'm a facilitator. I facilitate you to your journey to get to your greatness. The greatness is something that was created in you, that was given to you by your creator, by God. Like Dr. Karen and Liv said, we are all wired for greatness. We're all wired for success. But we're not all aware how to unlock that.
How to unlock it.
So as a coach, that's what
you do.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And just one last parting word. We've got 2 minutes for, the young people have been affected so much, especially the young people, by the Black Lives Matter movement and the talk about race and the death of George Floyd. What words would you have of encouragement to them in terms of their blackness as not a limitation, but just to encourage them?
This is a complex conversation, and I'm involved in various ways. Right now, I've got organizations that work across the Atlantic who are, we're in conversation. They want me to work with them to kind of, help them in terms of strategy to be able to move that conversation on in a meaningful way in the workplace. The first thing that I would say is that, I think in some ways, even I have contributed to this through my poetry. And I've actually written an article of this on my LinkedIn where I talk about, all these wonderful things like, Ubuntu, Wunu, forgiveness. All those things are great, and I'm a massive advocate for them. But I think where we dropped the ball is that we didn't have an awareness, or people didn't have an awareness that, when equality has not been addressed. So we address the idea of reconciliation, inclusion, Ubuntu, we're all together. But there's a power dynamic that exists. Yeah. And that power dynamic is that if you are this certain skin color, you're not going to do well in certain environments. And that is wrong. So we have to be, blatant about that. We have to be very clear about that. That the inequalities have to be addressed we can't continue with the utopian conversation of let's all hug each other, right?
Yes.
There has to be the inequalities have to be addressed, and by the way, now it's not a black versus white conversation, because you saw how many white people were in the streets, protesting against this. But we cannot shy away from, actually, it's black people who are marginalized. So even those white allies who are coming and supporting that movement have to have that clarity that you cannot be apologetic about that. So that's point number 1. But point number 2, more importantly for the young people, understand that who you are is deeper than even your skin color. Your skin color is part of who you are, and so therefore do not be kind of loud into this conversation of a race neutral society. Because while I understand that race is a social construct, in other words, it's something that was created for the purposes of keeping one group advantaged and another one disadvantaged, but it exists nonetheless. So people could have gone with shoe size and chosen shoe size to discriminate against one group. In fact, in some parts, they used even the shape of your nose, and genocides have been conducted on these things. But the point is, given that the society is racialized, it means we have to deal with those inequalities. But for yourself, understand that you are a lot more than just your physical body. Embrace yourself, embrace your full identity, go on a journey of self-discovery. And that journey never ends. It's through that way you really unlock your potential. Do not allow society to define you. If do not even define yourself with some of those limitations that you may have yourself. Allow yourself to be challenged by your thinking, to be challenged by other people's thinking. Like I said, immerse yourself in the right kind of, the kind of information that you're putting in yourself, and then unlock that potential. And I always say this to the young people: never let your background keep you in the background. Your background, in fact, is it's an advantage. It's an asset. Do not use it as a disadvantage.
Wonderful. And on that note, we're going to have to end because of our time. But never let your background keep you in the background. I think if there's one thing you must remember, never let your background keep you in the background. And you are not your physical.
It's only a small part of you.
It's only a small part of you, isn't it? That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's been so phenomenal. I could keep on just listening and listening and listening. And I hope you've been encouraged, you've been empowered, you've been blessed. And you can contact Coach Dumi. We'll put his details underneath the screen and allow you to contact him directly, and the website details. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And thank you for being here.
And thank you to your viewers as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Be blessed. Thank you.